I still remember the moment the ramp dropped on that landing craft. June 6, 1944, Omaha Beach. The sound hit me first. A deafening wall of machine gun fire mixed with the screams of men and the crash of waves against steel. I was 22 years old, barely old enough to buy a drink back home in Tennessee, and I'd never been more terrified in my entire life. My name is James Mitchell, and I was a combat medic with the 1st Infantry Division. They called us the Big Red One. I'd joined up 2 years earlier, fresh out of high school, thinking I'd serve my country and come home with stories to tell. Basic training at Fort Benning had been tough, but nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what I saw when that ramp fell. The water was red, not metaphorically, not in some poetic sense. The Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Normandy was literally stained crimson with American blood. Bodies floated past us as we waded toward the beach, and the Germans had every inch of that sand zeroed in with their MG-42 machine guns. Those guns fired so fast they sounded like tearing fabric, a sound I can still hear in my nightmares 70 years later. "Move, move, move!" Sergeant Baker screamed behind me, pushing us forward through the chest-deep water. I clutched my medical bag above my head, trying to keep the supplies dry, my rifle slung uselessly across my back. I'd qualified as a sharpshooter in training, but I'd made a promise to myself and to God that I'd never take a life. My job was to save them. The man next to me, Private Rodriguez from Brooklyn, suddenly jerked backward. A red mist appeared where his throat had been. He looked at me with wide, confused eyes before slipping beneath the waves. I reached for him, but another soldier grabbed my arm. "Keep moving, Doc, you can't help him." It was Corporal Davis, a farm boy from Iowa, who'd befriended me during the crossing from England. His face was pale, his hands shaking as he gripped his M1 Garand. We pushed forward through hell itself. The beach was maybe 300 yards away, but it felt like 300 miles. Men were falling all around me. Not just falling, but being torn apart by bullets and shrapnel. Artillery shells from the cliffs above created massive craters in the sand, sending body parts and equipment flying through the air. I made it to the beach and threw myself behind a steel hedgehog, one of the German beach obstacles designed to rip apart landing craft. My uniform was soaked, my hands trembling so badly I could barely hold onto my medical bag. The noise was absolutely overwhelming. Explosions, gunfire, screaming, it all blended into a symphony of chaos that threatened to break my mind. "Medic! Medic!" The cry came from everywhere at once. I looked left and saw a soldier dragging himself across the sand, leaving a trail of blood behind him. His legs were shattered below the knees. To my right, another man clutched his stomach, trying to hold his intestines inside his body. Ahead of me, dozens more were pinned down behind obstacles and corpses, wounded and dying. For a moment, and I'm not proud of this, I froze. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to stay behind that obstacle, to keep my head down, to survive. I was just one man with a medical bag. What difference could I possibly make? Then I saw him. A young soldier, couldn't have been more than 18, laying in the open about 20 yards ahead. He was crying for his mother over and over again. "Mom, Mom, please, Mom." His right arm was gone, blown off at the shoulder, and blood was pumping out in rhythmic spurts. I knew he had maybe 2 minutes before he bled out completely. Something inside me broke through the fear. I don't know if it was training or faith or just basic human decency, but I found myself moving. I crawled out from behind that hedgehog and started making my way toward him, keeping as low as I could. Bullets kicked up sand all around me. A mortar round exploded 30 feet to my left, showering me with debris. I reached the kid, Private First Class Tommy Sullivan from Boston, and immediately went to work. I pulled a tourniquet from my bag and wrapped it around what remained of his shoulder, cinching it as tight as I could. The blood flow slowed to a trickle. I gave him a shot of morphine and bandaged the wound as best as I could with trembling hands. "You're going to be okay, Tommy," I told him, having to shout over the noise. "You're going home. You're going to see your mum again." His eyes focused on me, tears cutting tracks through the sand and blood on his face. "Promise?" "I promise," I lied. I had no idea if he'd make it, but he needed hope more than he needed truth. I dragged Tommy back toward the seawall where other wounded were gathering. By the time I got him to relative safety, my lungs were burning and my arms felt like rubber. But there were more, so many more. "Doc!" Corporal Davis appeared beside me, his face splattered with someone else's blood. "We need to move up. The company's pinned down by that bunker." He pointed toward a concrete fortification halfway up the bluff, where a German machine gun was cutting men down like wheat before a scythe. "I need to help the wounded first," I said. "They're all going to be wounded if we don't take that bunker." Davis grabbed my shoulder. "Captain's asking for volunteers to rush it. We need every man." I looked at the bunker, then at the dozens of wounded men around me, then back at Davis. "I can't leave them. This is where I'm needed." Davis stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay, Doc, okay." He squeezed my shoulder once, then ran off toward where Captain Morrison was organizing the assault. I turned back to the wounded and got to work. The hours that followed were a blur of blood and morphine and desperate prayers. I moved from man to man, crawling through the sand when I had to, running when I could. The Germans never stopped firing. Every time I thought the barrage couldn't get worse, another wave of artillery would rain down from the cliffs. I learned quickly to prioritize. Sucking chest wounds got sealed with the wrapper from a morphine syringe and tape. Arterial bleeding got tourniquets. Head wounds got bandages and prayers. There wasn't much else I could do. I gave out morphine like candy, trying to ease suffering even when I knew the wound was fatal. Around mid-morning, I found Sergeant Baker pinned under a destroyed Higgins boat. Both his legs were crushed, and he was going into shock. His lips were blue, his breathing shallow and rapid. "Hey, Sarge," I said, kneeling beside him in the shadow of the wrecked craft. "Let's get you fixed up." "Can't feel my legs, Doc," he whispered. His face was gray, covered in a cold sweat. "That's bad, isn't it?" I didn't answer. I gave him morphine and tried to make him comfortable, but there was no way to move the boat without equipment we didn't have. "Help's coming," I told him. "Just hold on." "My wife," he said, grabbing my wrist with surprising strength. "Margaret, in Chicago. You tell her. Tell her I love her." "You're going to tell her yourself, Sarge." But his grip loosened, and his eyes lost focus. I felt for a pulse and found nothing. Sergeant Baker, who'd trained me, who'd looked out for me during the crossing, was dead at 34 years old. I closed his eyes and moved on. I had to. There were others who still had a chance. By noon, the tide had turned, literally and figuratively. The water was coming in, threatening to drown the wounded who'd been left on the beach. At the same time, our forces had finally started to make progress up the bluffs. I worked at a steady, exhausted pace, operating on autopilot. Apply pressure, tie tourniquet, administer morphine, move to the next. My hands were covered in so much blood they looked like I was wearing red gloves. "Doc Mitchell!" A runner slid into the sand beside me. "Captain Morrison needs you up at the rally point. We're preparing to move inland." "I can't leave yet," I said, gesturing at the wounded around me. "There are still men who need help." "Orders, Doc. The Navy corpsmen are landing now. They'll take over here." The rally point was in a crater near the seawall, where Captain Morrison was organizing what was left of our company. We'd landed with 160 men that morning. I counted maybe 80 still standing. Morrison looked like he'd aged 20 years in the past 6 hours. "Mitchell," he said when he saw me. "Thank God. How many men did you treat down there?" I had no idea. I'd lost count after 30. "A lot, sir. You saved a lot of lives today, son." He clasped my shoulder, then turned to address the gathered men. "Listen up, we're moving inland to secure the town of Vieilleville-sur-Mer. Anyone too wounded to walk, stay here and wait for evacuation. Everyone else, on your feet." We moved out in a ragged column, climbing the bluffs on paths that had been cleared by combat engineers. About halfway up, we started taking sniper fire. A bullet cracked past my head, so close I felt the displacement of air. The man in front of me, Private Jackson from Georgia, suddenly stumbled and fell backward. I caught him and found the entry wound in his upper chest, just below the collarbone. The bullet had gone clean through. I packed both wounds with gauze and gave him morphine. "Can you walk?" "Think so." "Good man." I helped him to his feet. We continued up the bluffs together, moving from cover to cover, while other soldiers returned fire at the German sniper. We reached the top just as the sun was beginning its descent. From up here I could see the entire beach below, a scene of absolute devastation. Hundreds of bodies lay scattered across the sand and floating in the surf. Destroyed vehicles and equipment littered the shore. Smoke rose from dozens of fires. We'd done it. We'd secured Omaha Beach, but the cost had been almost unimaginable. Vieilleville-sur-Mer was a small French farming village that had been occupied by the Germans for 4 years. We entered cautiously, expecting resistance. Instead, we found ruins. Allied bombing had reduced most buildings to rubble. A stone church still stood, its steeple pointing toward heaven, but its walls were pockmarked with bullet holes. Captain Morrison set up our command post in the church. I immediately turned the nave into a makeshift aid station, clearing away debris and laying out my remaining medical supplies. The wounded started arriving within an hour. First came men from our own company, Then soldiers from other units who'd heard there was a medic at the church. I worked through the evening and into the night, operating by candlelight. The injuries were horrific. Shrapnel wounds, bullet wounds, burns, crushed limbs, traumatic amputations. I did what I could with limited supplies, cleaning wounds, applying bandages, administering morphine, performing basic field surgery when necessary. Around midnight, Corporal Davis brought in a German soldier who'd been found wounded in a basement. He looked about my age with blonde hair and blue eyes, and a hole in his side that was bleeding steadily. "Want me to just leave him?" Davis asked. There was no hostility in his voice, just exhaustion and a practical question. I looked at the wounded German, then at Davis. "No, bring him in." Davis nodded and helped me lay the German on one of the pews. I cut away his uniform and examined the wound. The bullet had missed vital organs but caused significant bleeding. I packed and bandaged it, then gave him morphine. His eyes fluttered open, focusing on me with fear. "Bitte," he whispered. "Bitte nicht töten." I didn't speak German, but I understood the tone. "Please don't kill me." "It's okay," I said softly. "You're safe. No one's going to hurt you." He didn't understand my words, but something in my tone must have reassured him. His body relaxed slightly and his eyes closed. Private Jackson, sitting nearby with his arm in a sling, had seen the whole thing. "Why'd you help him, Doc? He'd have killed any of us if he had the chance." "Maybe," I said, washing the German's blood off my hands. "But that's not who I am. I'm a medic. I help people, period. Doesn't matter what uniform they're wearing." Jackson thought about that, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, okay. I can respect that." Around 3 in the morning, I heard commotion outside. A convoy of trucks and half-tracks was rolling into the village. Reinforcements. Behind the military vehicles came several ambulances with real doctors and nurses. Captain Morrison appeared beside me. "Looks like the cavalry's arrived. You can finally get some rest, Mitchell." But I couldn't rest. Not yet. I helped transfer my patients to the ambulances, giving detailed reports about each man's injuries and treatment. The German soldier went too, carried out on a stretcher by 2 Navy corpsmen who didn't give his nationality a second thought. By the time the last ambulance pulled away, the eastern sky was beginning to lighten. I'd been awake for more than 24 hours. Now, suddenly, with nothing left to do, the exhaustion hit me like a physical weight. I stumbled back into the church and collapsed onto a pew. My uniform was stiff with dried blood. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the beach again, saw all those young men dying in the sand. "Doc?" Corporal Davis sat down beside me. "You okay?" "Honestly, I don't know." My voice cracked. "I keep thinking about all the ones I couldn't save. Rodriguez, Sergeant Baker, that kid from Texas. So many of them, Davis. So many." Davis was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Captain Morrison told me something earlier. He said you treated 75 men today. 75. Some of them would have died without you. You gave them a chance." 75. The number seemed impossible. 75 lives that I'd touched. 75 families back home who might get their sons or husbands or fathers back because of what I'd done. It didn't make the grief go away, didn't erase the faces of the ones I'd lost, but it helped. A little. We stayed in Vieuville-sur-Mer for 3 more days, securing the area and preparing for the push deeper into France. More troops poured in every day, thousands of men along with tanks, artillery and supplies. On the 3rd day, Captain Morrison called me to the command post. Inside, I found him with a colonel I didn't recognize, a distinguished-looking man in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and a chest full of medals. "Private Mitchell," Morrison said, "this is Colonel Henderson from Division HQ. He'd like to speak with you." Henderson studied me with sharp eyes. "I've been reading the reports from Omaha Beach. Your name comes up quite a bit. Multiple officers have recommended you for commendation." I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. "Captain Morrison tells me you treated 75 men in the first 12 hours of the invasion. You repeatedly exposed yourself to enemy fire to reach casualties. You refused evacuation, choosing instead to stay with the wounded. That's considerably above and beyond doing your job." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "By order of General Omar Bradley, you're hereby awarded the Silver Star for gallantry in action. Additionally, you're being promoted to sergeant and transferred to the 1st Medical Battalion. The Silver Star, the 3rd highest military decoration for valor." I stared at the medal as Henderson pinned it to my chest, feeling numb. It felt wrong somehow, accepting an award for doing what any decent person would do. "Thank you, sir," I managed to say. After Henderson left, Morrison poured me a cup of coffee. "You deserve it, Mitchell. What you did on that beach. I've never seen anything like it. Not enough, I said quietly. I keep thinking about the ones I couldn't reach, the ones I couldn't save. Morrison took a long sip before answering. You want to know what I think? Every single man who made it off that beach had a reason. You had a reason, Mitchell. You were there to give 75 men a fighting chance. That's your reason. We sat in silence for a while, drinking bad coffee and listening to the sounds of war preparation outside. Finally, Morrison said, your transfer orders come through tomorrow. You'll be heading to the medical battalion in Bayou. But the men of this company will never forget what you did for us. Never. That night, I wrote letters. I'd been collecting names and home addresses from wounded soldiers for days. Now I had a stack of letters to write, to Rodriguez's mother in Brooklyn, to Sergeant Baker's wife Margaret in Chicago, to dozens of other families who deserved to know what had happened to their loved ones. I told them their sons and husbands had been brave. I told them they hadn't suffered. I told them about the good things they'd done, the jokes they'd told, the friendships they'd made. I tried to give them some comfort, some small piece of closure. When I finished, dawn was breaking again. Another day in France, another day of war. But for 75 men, it was a day they got to see because of what had happened on Omaha Beach. I never thought of myself as a hero. Heroes were the soldiers who rushed German bunkers, who charged into machine gun fire. I was just a medic who couldn't stand by and watch people die. But if refusing to run, if choosing to stay and help when every instinct screamed at me to hide, if giving everything I had to save as many lives as possible, if that made me a hero in someone's eyes, then I'd accept it. Not for the glory or the medals, but because it meant something. It meant that on the worst day of my life, on the longest day in history, I'd made a difference. I'd kept my promise to save lives instead of taking them, and 75 families would get their loved ones back. That was worth everything. Worth the fear, the exhaustion, the nightmares that would follow me for the rest of my life, because in the end, that's what we were all fighting for. Not for glory or conquest, but for the chance to go home, to see our families again, to live the lives we'd been given. I folded my letters carefully, addressed the envelopes and handed them to the mail clerk. Then I gathered my few belongings and prepared to report to my new unit. The war was far from over. There would be more battles, more wounded, more lives to save and more lives to lose. But I'd faced the worst hell had to offer on that beach, and I'd come through it. I'd refused to run when every fiber of my being wanted to, and I'd do it again, as many times as it took, until this war was finally over and we could all go home. That was my promise. To myself, to my brothers in arms, to all the ones we'd lost along the way. I wouldn't run. I would stay and fight in my own way, with bandages instead of bullets, with morphine instead of grenades, with compassion instead of hatred. I was a medic, and on D-Day, when the world was ending around me, that had been enough.